Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Monk Chat. So this is your opportunity to ask any questions of the monastic Sangha that you wish, and we'll do our best to answer. And so this evening we have with us Bhante Sumita, our senior monk from Sri Lanka, and Ayya Vimagnani, our visiting scholar from Germany. And me, Bhante Sudaso, the resident responsible for this monastery. So we'll go ahead and start taking your questions as you enter them. I see a few questions already in the chat, so please continue adding more questions so that we can have a lively discussion today. So we'll start with the very first question. So Joy asks, Trump is considered a bodhisattva in some Asian communities. What are your thoughts? Is his wealth in this life due to a past life generosity? Well, technically speaking, every single sentient being is a bodhisattva because at some point in our countless previous lives, at some point, we've all made bodhisattva vows at one point or another. Whether that's currently affecting our activities in this life is a matter of what we choose to do in this life. So some people also take bodhisattva vows in this life and other people don't. So it kind of depends what you mean by bodhisattva. So from one perspective, everyone is a bodhisattva. From another perspective, only people who currently have made bodhisattva vows in this life can be called a bodhisattva. So in that sense, then I would be inclined to say by the first definition, yes, he is, as well as everybody else. By the second definition, I think almost certainly not. I have seen no evidence whatsoever that he has even the slightest interest in Buddhist practice, let alone having taken any formal bodhisattva vows. I would be absolutely stunned to find out if he had. As for the second part, is his wealth in this life due to past life generosity? And that's speculation, but it would be in line with how the Buddha speaks about karma. In the Chulakama Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha says that the path to wealth is generosity. That if you are generous in this life, then you are likely to be wealthy in a future life. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a good person in a future life. So again, maybe in a past life, somebody was generous, and as a result, they generated good karma that led to being wealthy in this life. But in this life, they might be extremely stingy and cruel, in which case they might be receiving the benefits of their past actions, but in their current life, they're only generating bad karma. So it's important not to assume that just because somebody is having good fortune, that necessarily they're a good person. Because somebody can be a very bad person. They're just still experiencing the benefits of a good past life. Any other thoughts on that? Okay. Next question. Patricia asks, would you please share some words on skillful death contemplation? Would either one of you like to take this?
Sure, I can say a few words. So I think the point of death contemplation is to deeply understand that death is inevitable. And so to reflect on what is important in one's life, to get one's priorities straight. So whatever we achieve in this life, whatever we can accumulate, whatever material possessions or status or learning or any other kind of achievements in the world, we will all have to give that up when we pass away, when we pass on to our next life. So deeply reflecting on this very often, ideally daily or even more often than daily, helps us to keep mindfulness established and to get our priorities straight and to understand what is really important in our life. So the only thing we can take with us when we pass on to the next life is the habit tendencies that we have built up in our mind and the good karma that we have made in the life. So this is something that can actually bring us, help us in the future, in the long term, and whatever other worldly things we can achieve or we can build up in this life is what we have to let go. So doing death contemplation very often helps us to strengthen our Dhamma practice and to keep focus on what is important in life. And of course, it also helps us to gain insight into impermanence, which is one of the 3 fundamental characteristics in Buddhism. And it's very important to not lose sight of that and not get too much distracted by all the other things that are happening in our life. So I think death contemplation is very, very powerful, especially also because usually many emotions are tied up with that, maybe fear, maybe aversion, maybe we don't want to think about this. So this is really something that can go very deep, where we can really understand how our mind works, how we are trying to distract us from even looking at or contemplating death. So this is also very powerful to understand the defilements that are going on in our mind. And so I think death contemplation works on many levels in the mind to attack different layers of defilements. And I think it's a very, very powerful practice. The Buddha actually said, only if you do death contemplation every moment, when you breathe in and when you breathe out, then you're doing death contemplation properly. If you just do it once a day, then you're not actually properly committed to the practice.
Great, thank you. Then Anita asks, can you please explain sakaya ditthi? Bhante Sumita?
Sakaya ditthi means we think our body, this is me, myself, I, me, myself. That way we always try to fabricate a false notion, and that is called sakaya ditthi. Ditthi means view, and sakaya means my own. So whatever belongs to, like we try to consider I, me, myself, and also we try to possess things. From the very childhood, we start accumulating things, possessing things, and then we don't want to let them go. And that way, actually, we are just because of that sakaya ditthi notion. And also it can lead to many other conflicts with the others. If someone says something, you might try to argue, counter attack, physically, mentally, verbally. Those things can happen to you. Also, you get hurt because of that sakaya ditthi. If you don't have sakaya ditthi, of course, then you don't get hurt.
Great, thank you. Next, Rick asks, how do we honor our commitments and be free from stress, such as having too much to do and not enough time, facing a deadline with serious consequences, or delays threaten missing a flight connection? Relax. Recognize that life doesn't always work out the way you want it to work out. So practicing equanimity, recognizing that sometimes you are going to face unpleasant situations, such as not being able to complete everything on time. Yeah, sometimes that's how life is going to be. Accept it. Sometimes you are going to miss a deadline and face unpleasant consequences. Yeah, that's how life goes sometimes. So face that with dignity and serenity. Delays threaten missing a flight connection. I've actually had that happen. I've missed flight connections before through no fault of my own. And that's life. That's just how it goes. What are you going to do? Basically, in all of these situations, you have a choice, and the choice is whether or not to suffer. So, too much to do, not enough time? Well, choose to not suffer. Facing a deadline with serious consequences? Well, choose not to suffer. Delays threaten missing a flight connection? Well, choose not to suffer. It's an internal choice that we make. If you want a practical thing to do, well, first off, take on less duties. That helps a lot. Set reasonable deadlines, ones that you know you can meet. Try to pick flight plans that are less likely to have missing connections, though accepting that it's just inevitable sometimes. Sometimes you really can't do anything about it. And one time I had a flight which was delayed by something ridiculous, like 3 hours. Sitting in the airport for 3 hours as they kept pushing back the departure. So in those situations, there really isn't anything you can do except practice equanimity and choose not to suffer. So yeah, I mean, try to set up your life in a way that's less stressful in the first place, but accept the fact that sometimes you're just going to have to face uncomfortable situations. And the only reasonable decision is to choose to not be bothered by it. Yeah, and so things like practicing mindfulness of the body help a lot. Practicing metta helps a lot. But ultimately, it's equanimity that gets you through those situations. Yeah, seriously, what's the big deal? Most of the time, it's really not a big deal. And next, Hayden asks, I've heard monastics sleep around 5 to 6 hours a night. What is the value of limiting sleep, and can lay people benefit from this as a practice? Either of you want to take this?
I think it is said the Buddha slept only 2 hours. So sometimes if you keep sleeping for long hours, sometimes we feel like we waste a lot of time in sleeping. So in our lifetime, if we sleep like 6 hours a day, if you live 100 years, that means you have slept 25 years. You can count on that how much actually you have just slept. And the more you sleep, the more you do nothing. And actually, the more you sleep, maybe it is kind of not really doing any good for you. And especially for everyone, I think those who have succeeded in life, they many of them actually are early risers. They wake up so early, and they go to bed early, and so that they can do achieve so many good things. And many people, when they when they enjoy the luxury of sleep and what you call dream or whatever, the other people are really working so hard, and they are getting a lot of good benefits. And I think for an average person, if you are really working hard, like very hard labor work, then you need to sleep around maybe 6 7 hours, maybe like 7 hours or something. And for the other people, I think maximum 6 hours would be good enough to sleep. And if you sleep more, that will be something that you are actually missing. So in life, don't waste so much precious time. We don't live so long, and also if you have so much to do, maybe yeah, make it a habit. It's also a matter of habit. And in Sigalo, the Sutta, the Buddha says, some people, when they are lazy, they think, oh, I'm hungry, because of that they don't want to wake up. And some people think, I'm okay, I can't work because I'm sleepy, or just try to procrastinate things because of your laziness. So thina middha is also called sloth and torpor. This bodily and mental lethargy is not going to help any of us to even achieve jhana. Let alone the jhana in your life. If you have some good vision and mission, if you have some goal in your life, then you have to fight it out. This thina middha can be really disastrous.
Okay, and next, Aurora asks, what are the 3 clear knowledges? As in, one possessing the 3 clear knowledges, peaceful, for whom renewed existence is finished, know him thus, Vaseta, as Brahma and Sakka. I have him, Lignani?
So is this talking about the Tevijja?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the 3 knowledges in Pali is called Tevijja, and these are 3 knowledges that often come with arahantship, but not necessarily in each and every case. And the first one is that you can remember past lives, way back, like hundreds, thousands of past lives. The standard description says you can remember many eons of universes expanding and collapsing, and you remember all the past lives with a lot of detail that you've had during this immeasurable span of time. So this is the first special knowledge that you can develop if you have very, very strong and very deep samadhi. And the second one is that you have purified your what is called the divine eye, or sometimes called the third eye. And you can see how beings are reborn according to their karma. So those beings that have a lot of good karma go to a good rebirth, and those beings that have a bad karma go to a bad rebirth. And so you're able to perceive that and to see the law of karma in effect, like working. Like you deeply can see that in reality, how that plays out. So that is the second knowledge. And the third one is the knowledge of arahantship, so the knowledge of the destruction of all your taints, of all your defilements, of all your asavas in Pali. And you deeply understand the Four Noble Truths, and then you see the destruction of your taints and attain arahantship. That is the third knowledge. So the third knowledge is the one that all arahants have, obviously, and the first 2 are optional. Many arahants have them, but not necessarily all of them.
Okay. And the next question is from Kumu, asking, could you please explain the difference between abhisankhara and sankhara? Do arhats have sankhara and not abhisankhara, as there is no upadana? Bhante Sumita, this one's for you.
Sankhara is also called karma. So I'm not pretty sure about that. Abhi is actually more profound in that sense. So Sankhara and Abhisankhara, in many cases, it is explained as fabrications or constructs or so whatever karma that you do through 6 senses, salayatana. So because of sankhara, the vijnana appears according to paticca samuppada, and so sankhara, the difference between sankhara and abhisankhara, I'm not really, I don't really remember about that. The distinction between the two. Sankhara and Abhisankhara, we can use it as general karmic formations.
And Kumu also asks, does having a good meditation practice take away the need to sleep more, as the mind is at rest more during waking hours? Yes, and this is usually especially apparent during meditation retreats. So when you're doing many, many hours of meditation every day, you're doing very little conversation, very little activity, very little work, and especially as your samadhi becomes strong, then you need much less sleep. So for me, after the first usually 3 days or so of meditation retreat, then my need for sleep drops by 2, 3, even 4 hours. So I need much less sleep than I normally do. You can get a similar effect during your daily life if you do, again, a lot of meditation every day, you have very strong samadhi, and you avoid things that scatter or distract the mind. So avoid excessive conversation, avoid music, avoid watching movies, avoid video games, avoid reading fiction and basically avoid anything which makes your mind active in ways that are not directly connected to the Dhamma, and focus on doing a lot of samadhi practice, then yeah, you won't need as much sleep. But yeah, especially during meditation retreats, you can really notice a difference. Yeah. Then there's kind of an odd question here I don't understand. Boy says, Kona worships the three lords. I don't understand. Maybe if you could rephrase your question and give some more explanation. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Then Shelley asks, I live with my mom, who's a nice person, but can often be controlling and angry with the people around her. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with her and avoiding negative karma? Ayavil Minyani, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I think this describes pretty much every mother or every parent out there ever, or maybe every person out there ever. Yeah, so I think the first thing is to have compassion for the mother, because the mother is the person who has given birth to you, and of course she's very attached to you. So she wants to make sure that you're safe, and for that reason she's controlling. And if you are opposed to being controlled, then there is a conflict, and then it's very easy to get angry. So to understand the different like the opposing interests that you and your mother have in this case, and to understand where she's coming from and to develop compassion, I think is very helpful in this case. And I don't know how old you are. If you are close to being an adult or actually being an adult, then I think it's good to have a conversation with your mother and just sit down and talk about the issue. And if this really bothers you, maybe you can try and let your mother also see things from your viewpoint. And maybe you can come to an amicable solution, ideally. And if that doesn't work, then practicing the Brahma Viharas, metta, and compassion for her will help to keep at least your mind happy and healthy and spacious, and not giving rise to anger and controlling tendencies yourself. And as you say, your mother is a nice person, so hopefully she is open to talking about this and seeing things from your side as well. But in the end, she's always the mother, and probably she will always have attachment to the child, and for that reason always will try to do what she thinks will make you happy.
Great, thank you. Then Sam asks, can monastics own medical insurance? Yeah, sure, why not? Yep, that was easy. Then Alyssa asks, daily recitals of 5 recollections, refuges, and 5 precepts all begin with I. How to reconcile that with no self? Bhante Sumitra?
5 recollections.
So we say things like, I take refuge in the Buddha and so on.
Yeah, okay, they mean the 5 precepts.
5 precepts and 5 recollections. Jarada Momhi Jaranganatito.
What is it?
I like the 5 recollections. Jarada Momhi Jaranganatito. Like I'm of the nature to get old. I'm not exempt from aging.
Oh.
Vyadi Dhammomhi Vyading Anatito.
Oh, okay.
Maranang, etc. Yeah, the 5 recollections.
So the case is there is something called Sammuti Satya and Paramatta Satya. So Sammuti Satya means like worldly truths. There are things that we can deal with otherwise without those truths. Like we have the computer, we have the tables, we have all these things. We have given names to these things. They are called Sammuti Satya. And so absolute truth is something different. Of course, if we see like all 3 of us are just 5 aggregates. so we just can talk to Venerable Sudha. So, hello, 5 aggregates, how are you? Doesn't make sense. So even the Buddha, in being arahants, they also had to use these mundane truths too. It's also important for certain communications and other things, but deep inside they know that there is nothing called I, me, myself. So just like that, you also, you know that I undertake to whatever observe the five precepts, or you observe these five recollections or whatever. When you say I, that is the samadhi sacha that you need to use in that case. But absolutely speaking, there is not even I eventually.
Then Aurora asks, in the Kasi Bharadvaja Sutta, why does the Buddha not eat food over which verses have been recited?
So this is from the Sutta Nipata, a sutta from the Sutta Nipata. And just to briefly tell the story for people who don't know it, the Buddha is on alms round and he comes to the field of a Brahmin called Kasi Bharadvaja. And the Brahmin first doesn't want to give him alms. And he criticizes the Buddha and tells the Buddha that he should plant his own crops and grow his own food, and then he can eat that food and he doesn't need to go on alms round and trouble other people. And then the Buddha tells him, well, I also plant and I also grow my own crops. And then he uses that as a metaphor to explain the development of the mind in the metaphors of like agriculture. And then the Brahmin is very impressed, and then he wants to offer alms, but the Buddha says, well, I'm not going to accept the alms now because I cannot accept alms for which I have given, well, I cannot accept alms in exchange for having given a teaching. So because you give it as kind of a payment for my teaching, I will not accept the alms, because basically Dhamma is given free, not in exchange for some kind of material favor. So in order to preserve basically the purity of Dhamma teachings, not teaching Dhamma as a livelihood, basically not exchanging Dhamma for material goods, and because of that he doesn't accept the alms. And I think that is the reason, to make sure that Dhamma teachings are not only given to wealthy people who can afford to offer something material in return, but to make sure that Dhamma remains accessible, and also that it doesn't get commodified and used basically as a means to get material goods.
Great. And Kumu asks, in Majjhima Nikaya number 45, the Chula Dhamma Samadhana Sutta, it says that someone living with strong lust, hate, and delusion, by living a perfect and holy life, upon death can have a happy destination next life. How is this possible? So the strong lust, hate, and delusion is vipaka from a previous life. So it's the result of karma that one had done previously. So by living the perfect holy life, so by living a spiritual life, you are creating the kamma of reducing your greed, hatred, and delusion, and cultivating contentment, compassion, and wisdom. So you may still continue to have strong lust, hate, and delusion in your mind, but that is the leftover resultant from your past lives. So your current karma that you're creating is the karma of mental clarity, the karma of equanimity, the karma of kindness. And it may not be immediately apparent because you still have so much leftover negative vipaka from a past life. But you're generating the conditions which will let you have a more pleasant and enjoyable life in the future. So this is why, even though somebody seems to still have a lot of lust, hatred, and delusion in their mind, because they're trying to create the conditions for a more wholesome mind, they'll get the results of that eventually, which may not be until their next life. So that would be my explanation as to how this is possible. Then Dinko has a very practical question. Is there a big difference between one long meditation session and a few shorter meditation sessions throughout the day? Bhante Sumita, what do you think?
Yes, actually, if you can sit for a longer meditation, so much the better. Sometimes it depends on your lifestyle. If you don't have that much longer time, then you can even go for shorter meditations. But longer meditation is recommended if you want to go for jhanas and samadhis. It always really helps. Sometimes when you have shorter meditations, it's good to keep in touch with that. Shorter meditations are okay. If you want to achieve jhana or something, always better to have longer sessions. Yeah, I think eventually we all have to go for longer sessions. Um, so sometimes if you are a beginner, you can start with a shorter meditation. It's more challenging actually to sit longer because bodily pain will be the key thing at the beginning, but also it's much more than the bodily pain later on. It is the mental stability, mindfulness, to keep the mind, the attention in one point, or unification of mind will not be so easy. So you need to keep working on that. Depending on that, actually, both these things I would say can be very helpful.
And Liz asks, I've noticed different monks do chants differently. Are chants to be sung with specific notes, as with singing songs with specific tunes, or are chants done in free form, so to speak?
Yeah, the different countries of Buddhism have different styles of chanting. So you will notice that, for example, Sri Lankan chanting is very, very different from Thai chanting, for example, and both of them are extremely different from Burmese chanting. So it's just that different cultures have evolved different chanting styles, and even within the same country, there are different styles from place to place. The important thing when you do chanting in Pali is usually that you get the long and short syllables right. So if you get that right, then people can chant together in harmony, and it's much easier to adapt to whatever tune is used by the lead monastic. So for me, for example, I originally was trained in a Thai style. Then I went to Sri Lanka for 2.5 years. And then I had to adapt to the Sri Lankan style. And that wasn't difficult for me at all because once you have the short and long syllables right, you can just adapt to the tune. But if you have that mixed up, then it becomes very confusing and it can very easily derail the whole chanting.
Then Bobby asks, do you enjoy koan study? I do, but I want to clarify a very important point about koan study, which is that your understanding of the koan will depend upon two things. One, your overall understanding of Buddhist doctrine, and two, the depth of your meditation practice. So I draw a very clear distinction between when I would study koans, say 15 years ago, versus when I read koans now. The experience is completely different. So what's changed in between then, between 15 years ago and now? What's changed is now I've read through the Sutta Pitaka cover to cover countless times. I've spent a lot of time studying Dhamma and learning Dhamma from senior monks and getting a much more thorough understanding of Dhamma. So then when I read a koan, I have a much better understanding of why the teacher was saying what they were saying, why that kind of answer would be a proper reflection of Dhamma under those conditions, why the elements of the story might produce the response that it did. So having a much deeper intellectual understanding of the Dhamma is very important. Many koans, if you do not have a thorough understanding of Buddhist doctrine, many koans are very difficult to understand. You will not understand them. It's very easy to form misconceptions of them. And the other element is depth of practice. A lot of the koans are trying to point to a deep understanding of emptiness, or a deep experience of samadhi, or some kind of profound insight. And if you haven't had those kinds of experiences in your own meditation practice, then you won't really understand what the koan is pointing to. It will just seem like some weird paradox or some absurdity, some meaningless statement. Yeah, so koan study, it's not for beginners. This is for advanced practitioners who have a very deep, thorough, and broad knowledge of the suttas, and also have a very advanced meditation practice. Otherwise, at best, you're wasting your time, and at worst, you're just generating internal confusion. Okay, next, Celestino asks, ego, pride, and conceit is a very bad, sneaky beast that does not let us see anything as impersonal. How can one overcome heavy emotional matters involving affection and feelings in order to defeat this ego that only makes us see our suffering and not that of others? Bhante Sumita?
I think pride and conceit, what we call mana. Mana is explained in many different ways. Sayyamana, Sadisamana, Heenamana, Sayyamana, Sadisamana, Heenamana. So, mana is something that we will carry until we attain the arahanthood. So, mana will be completely abolished only when you become arahant. So, that is a very, very strong latent tendency that we will have. Yeah, so if someone is more educated, you have the mana. If you are good looking, you have the mana. If you have a lot of money, then you have mana. Everything will build your mana. Good name and fame, let's say a political leader or even a religious leader, even an abbot of a temple can have the mana. Even for a person who practices meditation can have mana. Okay, I am meditating, the other one is not meditating. So mana can be there in so many. Mana is to measure. So you measure, you keep measuring with your own ruler. So that is why it is very difficult to contain. But that is why, for example, in Buddhism, we always prescribe to sit on the floor. So this is another way to counteract with the mana. So you become humble and you become simple. And also every month, like on full moon days, you get rid of all the ornaments and all the jewelry and all this stuff, and you become very simple. And these are ways of counteracting with the mana. That's why in 8 precepts, for example, you say Mala Gandha Vilepana Dharana Mandana Vibhusanatthana Veramani Sikkapada Samadhi. I mean, you get rid of all these things. Maybe like if you keep practicing, because those things are also, necklace can be mana. You have a golden chain. You might think of all those colorful things, and also the beautifications and clothes, the dresses, and all these things are actually building our own mana, conceit. And that is why in Buddhism, on full moon day, for example, when they practice 8 precepts, you wear just, everyone wears white clothes, and everyone wears simple and no ornaments, no on beautification, and also sitting on the floor. Everyone is equal. That way, we kind of get used to fight with the mana. And then also the second part, like affection and feelings. um, for example, when we say karuna, karuna means paradukke sati hadayang kampeti iti karuna. When you see someone is suffering, you naturally tend to feel sorry for that person, sympathy for that person. But remember, the karuna also is to the point that we don't feel weak. Sometimes people become even more weaker when you have karuna, but that doesn't really mean what is karuna. So karuna should be also stronger within. When you are having karuna or empathy or sympathy towards the others, you should not be weak. You should also be stronger inside. That's very important. So dealing with those emotions and affections should be balanced with your own inner peace, stronger inner peace. That's also very important.
And Dan Jones asks, when did you know it was the right time to go forth? So maybe we can each give our own answer to this one. So for me, there were 3 distinct moments which kind of added up to it. First one was when I was 18, and I'd been practicing meditation for a few months at the time. And I noticed what a dramatic transformation had occurred in my mind, even in the course of just a few months of meditation practice. So that was when I first thought, okay, maybe I should become a monk. The next one was when I was 19, and I had a clear recognition of the shallowness of sensuality. So recognizing that sensual pleasure is pretty shallow. It's pretty pointless and ultimately unsatisfying. So again, this thought arose in my mind of like, well, maybe it's time for me to go and be a monk. But then the third one, and I think this was the one that really made me break through, was when my father passed away when I was 20. And that's when I think the message finally got through that it was time for me to stop delaying monastic life, time to stop putting it off. So that's when I went to live in a monastery, and that's what I've been doing since. So that's what I would say. Aya?
Yeah, for me, I came in contact with Buddhism and I knew straight away. So I was 26 and I went on my first meditation retreat, not being Buddhist at that time. And I knew straight away on the first retreat that I need to ordain. It still took me 2.5 years though, between the first retreat and actually going forth, because it's not that easy for women and I didn't really have a clear idea where to go and where to ordain. So I took some time to explore different options and visit different places and stay with communities and figure things out. But the aspiration to get ordained as soon as possible, I had straight away when I came in contact with Buddhism. And I also had a very strong feeling of connection with Buddhism. So I think probably there were some tendencies from past lives there that led me in the right direction.
And Bhante?
I actually am from a traditional Buddhist country. So I think in our strong background in the country, in Sri Lanka actually, it's very unique. Many of the Buddhist families, they have those days actually we had big families. In my family we had 7 siblings. So one would go to the sasana. That was like a tradition, and another one would go to the sasana. Would be taken care of that by that child, and another one will go to the army to take care of the frontiers of the country, and another one will go to the paddy field, and they will take care of the cultivation of the country, and the girls will take care of the household chores. So that was the traditional setup. And we had many children those days, not like today. I think today is very small families. I don't know if they can offer a child to the sasana. It's difficult now, more challenging, not like those days. And I was also very much happy, and I think I had some of the monks in area, they approached my mom, if you want to offer your child to the temple, and she asked me. I said yes. I was just 11 that time, but I never hesitated, and I also never regretted about that decision. Never ever. I'm still very happy about that decision, and I'm pretty feeling so good that I became a monk. So when you become a monk, you become a part of the entire global family. And if you are just a lay person, I think we will be confined to that small family. So I always feel good, and wherever I go, I see my bigger family everywhere. So I feel really good. And Buddhism has given so much peace, happiness, loving kindness, generosity, and many wonderful good things to us, benefits, and I always enjoy that.
Okay. And Liz asks, how many meals a day do the monks eat at your monastery? So here we offer both breakfast and lunch. So breakfast is at 7 a.m. and lunch at 11 a.m. Sometimes some of the monks here will skip breakfast. Also, sometimes we don't have any lay people living at the monastery who offer breakfast. So if there's no lay residents here, then sometimes there's just no breakfast available, and there's only the lunch that people bring to the monastery. Yeah, so easy question. Then the next one, Kumu asks for all three of us, on a daily basis, what is the most difficult and unwholesome activity habit to get rid of? Well, for me, that's irritation, getting irritated by things or people, especially people. Even living with really nice people, I still get irritated. So I try not to get irritated, but it still keeps cropping up in my mind. Venerable?
Yeah, I think for me it varies a bit from time to time. So irritation was a big factor for a long time. At some point, it was also fear. At some point, went through a period where I was very fearful, and monastic life seemed very unstable. At the moment, I think it's procrastination. So I'm a little bit handicapped. My wrists are injured, so I can't really do much. So I just sit around, and I could use the time to meditate all the time. But realistically, I think I'm also wasting a lot of time doing nothing important.
In my case, I don't think I have irritation that much. I almost actually don't remember when I got angry.
Sadhu, sadhu,
So
sadhu.
for me, I think mostly I'm pretty relaxed, and even something really bad happens, I really try to, just accept it and don't get too much disturbed. I think I'm pretty good with that. So many bad things can happen to us, but this is life, so we have to accept it. And I think practicing meditation, yeah, I think will be very helpful. Sometimes, um, uh, like maybe something like procrastination to a certain extent, I would say. Sometimes, yeah, I should do it a little earlier, I feel. Yeah, otherwise, I think I'm okay.
I agree. You're okay, Bante. Yeah. And Rick asks, in what ways do you cultivate joy and happiness in your practice? Actually, for me, recollection of the Buddha. So thinking about the Buddha helps tremendously. Recollecting my own goodness, as the Buddha recommends, that also brings up a lot of happiness. Samadhi practice also is extremely serene kind of joy. Those are things that I like to do. do each of you want to give a short answer to this one? How do you cultivate joy and happiness?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So for me, one of them is recollecting the blessings of my life. So just recollecting that I had the opportunity to go forth, and that I have the opportunity to make this a meaningful life, and that I'm as far as I can, as well as I can, try to make this life count and not waste it away by doing meaningless things. And I think, as a monastic, I have a very unique opportunity to make that life count. And another thing is I like to study and read suttas and Buddhist texts, and that also brings me a lot of joy.
I think in my case, loving kindness has played a really remarkable role. So I really like to practice loving kindness, and even in sad moments or if ups and downs in life, you know, practicing loving kindness gives so much good energy and happiness. Yeah, wherever I go, I like to practice loving kindness. If I meet someone, if I go to a bunch of strangers, I practice loving kindness. If I go to an unknown territory, I practice loving kindness. So if I also see someone is like a little bit moody, then I also practice loving kindness towards that person. So at least I feel I am more comfortable with that, and also I really want that person to be happy as well. So I think practicing loving kindness brings so much happiness to me.
Great, wonderful. Then Liz asks, I've been on antidepressants for mild bipolar for 15 years, and I'm grateful for them. Are monks allowed to take prescriptions?
Yes, of course. Medicine is one of the 4 requisites. So, of course, this is one of the fundamentals of monastic life. And if you have an illness, then you should treat it.
Okay, that was easy. Then Aurora asks, what is the next world? As in the Sabya Sutta, one who is peaceful, having abandoned merit and evil, dustless, having understood this world and the next, is truthfully called an ascetic. Bhante?
Would you like to?
Or I can take this one.
Yeah. Okay.
The next world means your future life. So this world means this life, and the next world means your next life, which might be in another plane of existence entirely. Or it might be just another human life, another human existence. So saying understood this world and the next means understanding rebirth, understanding how karma and rebirth work. Then Rick asks, how do we know if we're doing enough in our practice? I feel torn between compulsively driven and taking it too easy. You know by the results. What's going on with your mind? If you push too hard, then you'll notice that it makes your mind uncomfortable and agitated, and it doesn't necessarily get good results. But if you slack off too much, if you're too lazy, then you'll also notice that you don't get good results. So yeah, experiment and pay attention to the results. See what happens. Yeah. Do you have something you wanted to add?
About the
This one. Torn between being compulsively driven, like trying too hard, and taking it too easy.
okay, kind of complacent sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think not to worry too much and just do the best you can. In Buddhism, we also have something called virya and adhitthana. So adhitthana means you determine yourself. This is a very important requirement to attain the spiritual gains. And the other one is virya. You need to make some effort. Nothing will come to you just like that. Of course, if you have some good past karma, things will happen. But you have to make some effort. I think that is the key to everyone's success. And yeah, Thinamita, you have to uh, counteract with Thinamita with that Aditthana and Virya. That means sloth and torpor should be counteracted with determination and effort.
Okay. And next question, Alex asks, are there cases where abortion does not violate the first precept? Would you like to answer this one?
No, you can take that one.
Okay. First off, it's interesting that you instantly assume that it usually does violate the first precept, because this is actually not a clear-cut black and white issue in Buddhism. So it's abortion is briefly mentioned in a few places in the Vinaya. Not sure it's mentioned at all in the suttas. If it is, it's extraordinarily rare. And its relationship to the first precept is never made explicitly clear anywhere that I'm aware of. What we do know is in the Vinaya, it says that bhikkhus and bhikkhunis should not encourage other people to get abortions. So we should not tell somebody to get an abortion. That's what we know for sure. So if you go to a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni and you ask them, should I get an abortion? They are not going to say yes. They're either going to evade the question or encourage you to consider your options or something like that, but they're not going to give you a direct yes. Yeah, so I would just say reflect deeply on why. If you're thinking about making that choice, think deeply about why you want to make that choice and whether it's really the right choice or not. Yeah, as far as I've been able to tell from reading the suttas and the Vinaya, there's not actually a clear, specific black and white answer to that question.
I think there are some cases where it clearly does not violate the first precept. For example, if for example, when the mother's life is in danger, or when the baby isn't actually, like for example in an ectopic pregnancy where the baby can't actually develop, then it's not killing because the baby cannot live anyway.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, and I think that might be part of why the Buddha did not give a clear black and white statement about the subject. So therefore, we're not going to give you a clear black and white answer. Next, Vidura asks, I like my music, gaming, and TV shows. Usually I overdo all that. How do I find a balance? By stop doing it. That's how. The balance is 0. 0 is the balance point. Anything over 0 is too much. There's your answer. Anything else?
I think if it becomes an addiction, then you already said it is overdoing, so you have to balance it. If you become addicted to anything, like watching TV or games or social media, whatever, then you know how harmful it is to you and for your own health and also your study, your other social connections, everything will be hampered. So you have to think of it.
If you think of these things as self-mutilation, then you ask yourself, what's the right amount of self-mutilation to do every day? Because that's basically what we're doing when we engage in activities like this. So music and gaming and TV shows and so on. What are we doing? We're cultivating unwholesome states of mind and reducing wholesome states of mind. And we're wasting time. So in other words, we are damaging our spiritual faculties. So that's the spiritual equivalent of self-mutilation. So what's the right amount of self-mutilation to do every day? That's the question you're asking. So yeah, if you don't want to give it up entirely, well, then try reducing or set clear limits. Like maybe say, well, I really don't want to give up TV shows, or I really don't want to give up gaming or whatever. Well, then set a limit. Like I'll do a maximum of 1 hour per day, or only between this time and this time, and not at other times of day. So set clear limits to start to give you some sense of self-restraint. And really stick to your limits. Once you make a determination, stick to it. Maybe start with a certain amount of time, like for the next week. So starting tomorrow until the following Saturday, I'm only going to do 1 hour a day from, say, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. So setting a clear limit for a certain amount of time and seeing how it goes. Similar to how with the 8 precepts, commonly people take the 8 precepts on Uposatha days. So once or twice a month, you take a single day where you don't do any of these activities at all for the whole day. So that's also helping to build some self-restraint around it. And that can help to counteract the addictive tendency, as Bhante Sumita was saying. Okay. Then Sam asks, what's the meaning of offering of food? The chant, Bojanang parikapitang, anukampang upadaya, patiganhatu muttamang.
The meaning. Bhojanang parikapitang means anukampang padaya patiganhatuttamame. When we offer something to the noble qualities of the Buddha, we say, please accept this food out of compassion for us. And that is the meaning. But when we offer the food, actually, we don't offer that food to the person, but to the noble qualities of the person. Even when you offer something to the Mahasangha, Sangha means the community. So it's not the person who is in front of you. Actually, the noble qualities, the virtues of all those wonderful monks who have been living in the past, or the great arahants, monks, all of them are counted. Their noble qualities are counted. So thinking of their wonderful qualities makes us very happy and peaceful. That is why we do that. And practicing generosity is the other thing. Like when you offer something, it helps someone to survive for a while. For example, the monks, Bhante Sudaso mentioned here, if you don't bring food here, we will, you know, we will be in trouble. We won't be able to practice our meditation, and so it's important that you help them. And then the monks also practice generosity, loving kindness, and they also share the Dhamma with you, and that way mutually we benefit with each other. And practicing when you offer food also, we directly attack the lobha, the greed. So it's again important. Attachment. We always want to possess things, and here we try to give away something that belongs to you, and that way we slowly, when you keep practicing it, especially in the Buddhist countries, this is a very very strong practice. They practice dana a lot. That's an integral part of their lifestyle.
Okay, then Dhammajiva has a question for all of us. He says, would you all share which monastics have been your special mentors and teachers? So, yeah, the first person that comes to mind for me is Ajahn Pasano. So my preceptor and the monk who presided over my basic training. Yeah, he's been incredibly transformative. The teachings he's given to me really helped to form the foundation of my approach to monastic life, and also my approach to Dhamma practice in general. So I don't use the same meditation methods that he uses, but the perspectives and attitudes that he taught have made it possible for me to live a peaceful and productive spiritual life. So Ajahn Pasano was definitely number one of people I've met in life.
Yeah, my teacher was and still is Bhante Suchato. He was the one who did my seminary ordination, and also I'm just very inspired by the work that he's doing. And yeah, he has just given me really a lot of very, very helpful and very good advice. In terms of Vinaya, my teacher is usually Ajahn Brahmali. Yeah, and of course, my Bhikkhuni preceptor was Ayagunasari, and she's also a very, very special person. She has an incredible amount of metta, and she's just an incredibly kind person, and yeah, she just has a really, really good heart, and I think she's very inspiring as a monastic.
By October 29, I complete 40 years in the robe. So during this long time, I have met so many really, really wonderful monks, and some of them are unforgettable, really. I always feel so good to think of them. For example, Bhante Nauyane Arya Dhamma and Bhante Balangudananda Maitreya, Bhante Madihe Panyaseya, and Bhante Katukurunde Jnana Ananda. They are really amazing monks. Apart from that, we also, they are not really, there are many, many monks who are not so popular, but they are such wonderful monks. And think of them, and when they are amazing compassion, loving kindness, and their practice, they are really very, very helpful. So I think n number of wonderful monks I have met in my life. I'm ever so grateful to all of them.
Okay. And Anne asks, what is the difference between mindfulness and awareness?
Oh, that is a tricky question. And I think it also depends very much which Pali words you associate with this, because mindfulness and awareness can be used quite interchangeably for the same Pali words. So, of course, in that case, there isn't really a difference. So, yeah, I think they're quite often used interchangeably. Sometimes mindfulness is used as a translation for the Pali word sati, and awareness, for example, Bhante Suchata uses the word situational awareness for sampajanya. And then there is a small difference if you use it that way. And the difference is, for example, mindfulness just means that you don't forget what you're supposed to do and that you pay attention to what's going on around you. And for example, a robber could be very mindful. So it's kind of a neutral quality. It can be wholesome, but it can also be unwholesome. And sampajanya means adds a wisdom quality to this, so that you are doing the appropriate thing for the situation. So the classical example, for example, is if there is a guard and he sees a robber coming in and he's just mindful, he sees how the robber comes in, how he takes all the stuff and leaves again. But if he has situational awareness, then he would take appropriate action, call the police or stop the robber or whatever he can do in that situation. So in that case, then there would be a difference if you use those words, like if you associate these English words with those Pali words. But other teachers use them interchangeably, so it depends.
Okay. And Sunya Nando, great name. Sunya Nando says, I've realized that a lot of worldly relationships and activities are dukkha, and it is better to meditate. That would explain your name. But being all alone can be sad. Can you keep connected to life just through metta meditation? Well, first off, yes, you can keep connected to life just through metta meditation. That is technically true. But I think it's important to make a difference between worldly relationships and activities and spiritual relationships and activities. So yeah, of course, worldly relationships and worldly activities, of course, those are destructive and best minimized. But try to cultivate Dhamma relationships. So friendships with other Buddhist practitioners who encourage you to practice well. Find out if there's monasteries or Dhamma centers near you where you can go and interact with other people who have a similar commitment to Buddhist practice. Or connect with people online. There's so many options these days. The pandemic really, it had one remarkably good effect, which is that it really accelerated the growth of the online Dharma movement. So you have a lot of ways to connect with Dharma practitioners online. Yeah, and of course, worldly activities are dukkha, so develop spiritual activities. Meditation is part. Also, sutta study is great. Chanting. Actually, if you're feeling lonely and bored, then find a nice recording of some Buddhist chanting that you like and put it on nice and loud and chant along with it nice and loud. That can be an incredibly effective way of overcoming both boredom and loneliness in one shot. Or if you already are familiar with Buddhist chanting and like to chant, you can also just chant by yourself, just really putting your heart and non-soul into your chanting, and just really relishing the activity of chanting. And again, that can be a way of driving away loneliness and boredom. But yeah, I mean, it's good to keep in mind, as the Buddha said in the Khaggavasani Suttas, if you can't find a wise companion, then it's better to be alone. It's better to be alone than to be with somebody who pulls you away from spiritual practice, someone who damages your good qualities.
I think today's we have a lot of online forums. You can easily join any of those Dhamma communities, like here, Monk Chat. You know, you will meet a lot of wonderful friends. Plus, there are many online forums, actually, groups, communities, Buddhist communities. You can, somehow connect with them, and you will find some spiritual companion. Yeah, you don't have to be like worry about that.
And Sam asks, for offshore listeners, is there any way we can offer dana? Yes. So it's possible to have food delivered to the monastery. If you want to know ways to do that, you can send us an email. And we'll connect you with our dana coordinator, and she can help you set that up. That's very kind. Then Aurora asks, I've been feeling bad about wasting too much time not practicing, and that makes me feel dejected and lowers my energy. So I waste more time because my energy is low. How do I break this cycle?
So, well, hopefully there are parts of your Buddhist practice that give you joy and give you energy. So it seems to me that you're not enjoying some part of your practice, which is why you're procrastinating and not wanting to do it. So start off with doing things that you enjoy, that are part of Dhamma practice. Maybe that's chanting, maybe that's offering food to a Buddha statue, maybe that's meditating. I don't know. It seems like meditating isn't really your thing at the moment. Maybe that's studying suttas, reading suttas, or listening to Dhamma talks. So whatever kind of draws you into Buddhist practice again is a good way to start. And if your practice isn't interesting for you or doesn't seem to work for you, maybe you can try a different meditation method that might work better for you. So yeah, it's difficult to give advice over the internet, obviously. So find a teacher close to you or somebody experienced that you can talk to and who can give you personalized advice on what they think might be a good meditation method for you to try. And just experiment a little bit and see if you can find something that brings that is more interesting for your mind and that draws you in more.
I'd also add to that, be very forgiving to yourself. Buddhist practice is really challenging. And we go through ups and downs, and times when we're very motivated and times when we're really lazy. That's normal. So be gentle with yourself, be forgiving with yourself. Yeah, we all go through these times. So actually sometimes just go and slump in a nice comfortable chair and just do nothing for a few minutes. Just let your mind drain out and do nothing for a few minutes. Sometimes that's actually a really helpful practice to do. Don't try to meditate. Don't try to do anything at all. Just relax and do nothing. And you'll start to discover that within that non-activity, there is the spark of energy, the spark of motivation. And you can activate that when you need it. Okay, then Hayden says, sometimes when meditating, I have involuntary movements. These seem to be targeting tension in my body, but there is little talk of this phenomenon in Buddhism. Should I try to restrain these movements? So involuntary movements are, they're not uncommon. It's common to have small or slight involuntary movements in the body, especially when your samadhi is weak, when your concentration is not well developed. Then it's common to have some minor involuntary movements in your body. Just pay close attention and make sure they're not voluntary. Sometimes we think a movement is involuntary, but it's actually something that we're doing. We don't have enough self-awareness to recognize that it's something that we're doing. So practice very strong mindfulness of the body. Be very sharply, clearly aware of your whole body. And you don't need to try to restrain the movements, just don't create the movements. Don't fuel the movements. Just let your body relax. And the movements will eventually stop on their own. As long as you don't contribute to them, they'll eventually go away. Then Anita says, I just deleted my Facebook account after a big struggle. Could not find a mid-path either. I hope I can maintain it this way.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Would you have any suggestions? Also, since a lot of Dhamma came through that. Venerables, either of you have comments?
Yeah, I would like to say sometimes, for example, the technology, you can really get rid of them. But having a balance is really important. Maybe, for example, sometimes you should be able to get rid of them too, just like you said, Facebook. If it's not helping you more, if it is more disturbing to you, and I think getting rid of them, that will be more helpful. And if you spend hours and hours going through the Facebook and getting restlessness and angry and agitation, if that is the result, also waste so much time, then so much the better you get rid of that. And many of those social media apps actually have been designed in such a way, psychologically you are addicted to that. So they have designed it that way. That is very unfortunate actually. I hope they should not do it. It's okay to a certain extent, but they make it to the point that you become addicted. So it's not really helpful to any of us. Yeah, and congratulations, you did that somehow. Got rid of Facebook, and see even the others. If you can get rid of the other bad habits too, so much the better.
And Rick says, living in healthy solitude in nature with my animal friends have been an important support to maintaining my spiritual practice and health. How do I determine if I need to make these a high priority or if I am clinging to these supports too much?
Well, I think ultimately only you can answer this question. It depends on whether your mind becomes more balanced over time, and if you become a happier, healthier individual, and if you think your defilements are decreasing. And if they don't, then you should change something. But I think it ties in with another question that we just talked about finding a spiritual community. So the Buddha didn't really design his path for people who are complete hermits. So even as monastics, we're not complete hermits. Actually, we're living in community. And I think for many people, it's much more communal than they expected in the beginning. And even the most reclusive monastics will usually have contact with people at least once a day when they go on alms round and get their food. And the Buddha also said that spiritual companions are the whole of the holy life, and he constantly encouraged people to be together with good people. So I really don't know your situation. Only you can tell whether it's too much reclusiveness and too much solitude. But yeah, I see that you're joining the live stream, so clearly you have some contact with people who are talking about Dhamma and who are giving you good company. So yeah, maybe you're fine. Maybe you have enough community there.
Okay, then next, Bill says, I have explored around and read suttas from each of the main Nikayas. But as far as the Digha Nikaya, I've only read the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. Are there 1 to 3 suttas from Digha Nikaya you would recommend? Well, first off, I recommend reading all the suttas cover to cover without skipping anything. So you say you've explored around and read some suttas from each of the main Nikayas. Well, that's fine. That's better than not reading any suttas at all. But what I recommend is to start by reading the Majjhima Nikaya, start to finish, don't skip anything. Then read the Samyutta Nikaya, cover to cover, don't skip anything. Then the Anguttara Nikaya, cover to cover, don't skip anything. Then, after you've read those 3 Nikayas, then read the Digha Nikaya cover to cover. There's also the 4 short collections of the Buddha's words, Dhammapada, Udana, Itivuttaka, and Sutta Nipata. And those are also important to read, possibly before the Digha Nikaya, actually. So I'll be perfectly honest, the Digha Nikaya is by far my least favorite of the Nikayas. But nonetheless, there are a few Digha Nikaya suttas that I can recommend, besides just reading the whole thing cover to cover after the other ones. The Mahanidana Sutta from the Digha is actually one of my favorite suttas in the whole canon. But just looking at the table of contents for the Digha Nikaya now, the Brahmajala Sutta is one I like. The Samanyapala Sutta, I also quite enjoy. The Mahanidana Sutta, as I just mentioned. The Sagalavada Sutta. Atanatiya Sutta. Those are all ones that I quite liked personally. Okay. Then Scott asks, can the Bhantes describe mood in terms of Dhamma? So it would fit under mind states? Do you know what this means, mood in terms of Dhamma?
Not really. How do different moods arise in the mind? Based on habit patterns, I guess.
Like happy, sad,
Maybe that's what they
angry.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be different moods, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
So Lobha, Dosa, Moha, all moods in a way.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Also, like some days you're cheerful or some days you're grumpy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's the results of the past mental actions we've taken. So if you create a lot of mental activities of hostility, then you're more likely to have days when you're irritable or grumpy. Yeah, so it's mind states arising based upon past mental habits. And also we can shape it to some degree by the choices that we make. Then Mina asks, how do I find out which Dharma technique is right for me?
Yeah, that is again a little tricky one. We can possibly say this is exactly suitable for you, but you need to also figure out which one is better. But if you have the interest, if you have the enthusiasm, you yourself will find for sure. And you keep exploring, you keep researching, you keep meeting, listening to Dhamma talks, and then you will eventually find yourself. And reading the books available, readily available, Dhamma sources are readily available, just a click away. There are many opportunities for you. Building up, good companion communication with wonderful, good friends will be really helpful, because Kalyana Mitra friends will be the key if you want to attain Sotapanna. Without that, you won't be able to do that. So it's always really very important that we find good friends, spiritually rich friends. You will recognize them, you will know them, whether they are helping you to the Nibbana. Then you should be able to um, learn more from them.
So we are out of questions and also out of time. So thank you all for joining in for this evening's monk chat. And please continue to join in with our ongoing live stream programs. And if you're in the area, we'll have our Katina celebration here on October 31st. So you're welcome to come. That will be an outdoor holiday celebration if you'd like to come and join in. Otherwise, please continue to participate in our live streams when you can, and hope to continue seeing you in the days to come. So we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.